What's up, y'all? You're listening to the My Nation podcast. I'm Alex Miller, joined always by Robert Cessna. Cease. It's the thick of the winter transfer window. A&M going after some guys, trying to fill out that 2025 roster. We got to talk with Mike Elko and a couple of players yesterday. You know, as we are in the midst of all of this and just getting to hear from Elko and the players yesterday, what's kind of your big takeaway of where things stand right now, A&M, the portal, everything that's going on with college football?
I think Elko said it best when he said, well, there's nothing going on at first, being facetious. And obviously there's so much going on, and we're only going to talk about sliver about that when you look at, the transfer portal, trying to play games. And, of course, I don't be ugly, but A&M's bowl game is not a meaningful game. There's meaningful college football playoff games that could be affected by the portal, and then I think that will wake everybody up. But I guess one thing that I was thinking about as we later last night, and you put it all together, I said to myself, where would A&M be without the transfer portal? I think A&M would be in trouble because they had a lot of weaknesses this year. And I don't know if that incoming freshman class would solve some of the weaknesses they have. A&M's looking to solve their problems through the transfer portal like a lot of people, and A&M's got problems. And I said, man, if Mike Elko didn't have the transfer portal facing with that team, facing that schedule, now, if he didn't have the transfer portal, I guess Wegman would have stayed, but he might have transferred somewhere else and set out a year. You don't know, but I'm just saying is everybody's looking to transfer portal to actually solve a lot of things.
Well, two big needs that A&M has on its roster, whether or not Mike Elko is going to acknowledge it or not right now. He was pretty mum about, what positions A&M might need to fill. He wasn't talking about guys that have committed, but that'll come at a later date. We'll talk about it then, what his thoughts are when it's all said and done. Wide receiver and defensive end, those seem to be the two positions that A&M needs to fill the most. They're starting to get some good traction at receiver. They've gotten Micah Hudson and Mario Craver on board through commitments. Still waiting on defensive end to shake out, but those are kind of the two starting points, I would say, that A&M is going for, and the two biggest positions of need. There'll be guys here and there, like they got Julian Humphrey, the cornerback from Georgia. They got a quarterback, right, and Jacob Zeno to get some depth and experience into that depth chart. But yeah, I thought it was interesting how some of these schools, they're like Auburn's posting all this stuff about Jackson Arnold signing, and then Elko's like, yeah, we're not talking about that right now. We'll talk about it in January when they get to campus.
And I always thought, okay, why is Elko taking that approach? One, I think he wants to focus on the players he does have here. I think he does want to focus. And I said all along, he will make the best out of this bowl because he will get those backup linemen, Kennedy and Howe and those guys to have good games. But also maybe think that he's looking to add elsewhere and doesn't want to tip his hand if there's another good defensive back out there or another good lineman that he could come across. I think he'd take it. He doesn't want to say, oh, we want to do that and then don't get that person. And I think some people are a little bit more, like you mentioned, Hugh Freeze, for example, is I think, and sometimes they're using that to get other players. Once again, all coaches are doing that to their advantage, and I always go say maybe Elko is an offensive lineman out of there, a backup for one of the college football playoff teams that he's not going to get for a while, and he's talked to that guy and said, hey, when we get done doing the run, I'll sign with you guys. Who knows?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember, too, last year, traction didn't pick up until after Christmas. A&M got a majority of their guys from the portal between the December 26th and the start of the spring semester.
Late start, too.
Yeah, it's a late start.
He had a late start.
And he had to finish the high school class. They moved the high school signing period up this year. So they've gotten an earlier head start on the portal stuff. So, is it been slow? maybe, but it's also been pretty steady. You know, they've got 5 commitments. They're probably going to get somewhere between 10 and 20 if I had to guess. And so it's just going to be a slow burn if I have to guess.
And also, I feel they'll get more out of this incoming freshman class as far to immediate production. And once again, he doesn't want to tip his hand, whereas Jimbo would say, like, oh, and other coaches, here's the 8 guys that are true freshmen are going to play because they're a stud. I think there'll be more bussies in this class that will contribute right away. And also, we don't know I think what's very telling is the freshman class they brought in last year, while it hasn't done much, all those guys evidently haven't left yet. They're still here. So some of those are going to be redshirt freshmen that obviously are going to contribute next year. And we don't know which ones he's counting on heavily because, once again, Elko's not tipping his hand, but obviously he knows what he's doing.
Well, I can think of a couple. Probably Ashton Bethel-Roman at wide receiver.
There you go.
Got Scout Team Player of the Year. And then look at the defensive Scout Team Player of the Year, Tristan Jernigan.
Right. I'm just saying, and he doesn't want to tip that because he might want to get a better defensive end or a better wide receiver to come in over those guys, but he doesn't want those guys to go. If they're the 3rd or 4th best option, then Michael goes, hey, this is great because we're 4 deep. He doesn't want to say, oh, we're going to go out and get a defensive end or we're going to go out and get 4 wide receivers, then those guys leave.
His whole synopsis was, at the end,
we'll let you know.
We'll have one side of what we lost and one side of what we got, and his hope is that what A&M got outweighs what they feel like they lost.
And without a doubt, A&M not only wasn't deep enough this year. When you think about it, they were missing some starters, like a wide receiver. The fact that they went 8-4. But once again, they had a little bit easier schedule. Next year, the schedule's tougher. He's got to have a better team next year just to get to 8-4. And of course, everybody figures he'll have a much better team. But that's for another day.
You know, the thing that I wrote about yesterday, though, is that, you know, multiple times during his press conference, and he's not the only coach that's done this week, calling for centralized leadership in college football, and that, you know, things are more chaotic than they've ever been, and that there needs to be rules and regulations put in as fast as possible. And, you know, you look around the country, you know, SMU and Penn State, they're facing off this Saturday in the first round of the playoff, right? And you've got Rhett Lashley and James Franklin both calling for help, right? The fact that the portal is in this very interesting time of the season, you got basically free agency smack dab in the middle of the postseason, is something that coaches are really clamoring about around the country, and Elko was one of them.
Let's say whether it's Penn State or SMU, and one of them has a 2-score lead at halftime and their quarterback gets hurt. Both quarterbacks have entered the transfer portal. If one of those teams would be winning and lose because they have to go to their backup quarterback, who would be the 3rd stringer, not the 2nd stringer.
Well, Preston Stone is staying with SMU.
Is he staying?
He's staying on the team. But Penn State doesn't have their guy.
But there could be problems. That will accent. For example, I think A&M and USC both have only one basically starting quarterback that matters on the line, but also it's the Vegas Bowl. No one cares that much. And I will say there's a lot of clamoring. There's been a lot of clamoring for centralized because, like, he said Sankey can say something, but that's just the SEC. What about the Big Ten? What about the ACC? What about the Big 12? Everybody wants centralized things, and I get it. I don't know when that's going to come, but I will say that college football has never been more in the news, never more better. The money, the fans, everything.
Viewers, it's crazy.
It's amazing. It's like everyone's printing money with all these, quote, problems. And I think that's why maybe everybody's slow to get an answer because, hey, we're doing great. TV's making money. Schools are making money. Or they better be. Kids are making money.
Kids are making a lot of money.
Kids are making a lot of money. So will it come about eventually? Yes. And everybody says, oh, you know, look at Dave Clawson. He got up. Yeah, because Wake Forest can't keep up with the big boys. Bottom line is they don't have the resources, and we're going to see that more and more with certain schools. But I'm just saying I know me, I'm going to enjoy, hopefully, watching the college football playoff play out on the field because the product on the field – because I'm looking at A&M. A&M's going out and getting all these players. They're going to be so much better than they were this year They might still not win 9 or 10 games, but they're going to have a better team.
Well, just a few news and nuggets about the bowl game. We'll have a full preview next week, of course, of the game itself. But A&M going to be without 3 starting defensive linemen, to no surprise. Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. They're all not going to play. Stewart and Scorton, of course, they're foregoing the last year of eligibility they have to go to the NFL. Turner's out of eligibility, but he's gearing up for the Senior Bowl and just decided, playing in this bowl game, probably not going to improve his draft stock. Being all in for Mobile is probably going to be more beneficial to his future, so can't blame the guy. But beyond that, the transfers, of course, they're not going to play in this game, it sounds like, the guys that have entered the portal from A&M. But you look around, A&M's in pretty good shape. They don't have any other opt-outs as of now, and I feel like at this point, if you were going to opt out, you're probably going to say something by now.
Yeah, and think about it, A&M has their heaviest losses at, quote, was the best position to me, which woefully underachieved. And I understand it just wasn't a defensive line's fault, but I think having new blood in there, so to speak, those guys are going to be jacked up to play. They're playing against a team that's got a lot of opt-outs. Southern California is not on, USC is not on the upswing right now. So I think everything works to A&M's advantage, even in the Las Vegas Bowl.
Oh, and by the way, USC's offensive line coach, Josh Henson, who was at A&M previously, he got hired at Purdue yesterday to be offensive coordinator, so he won't be at the game either.
Yeah, so he'll just be calling in his game plan, so to speak. So once again, in the game doesn't matter that much. But once again, Elko's going to make it matter because what he said, every day is like a championship day. That's what they want to do. And so I was kind of shocked that A&M was only a 3.5-point favorite for this game. Last time I looked, they got the quarterback. They've got. But that being said, you look at USC. They've had like 6 of their losses, 5 of their losses been by 1 score. I mean, they've been competitive, and you really don't know who's going to show up for a game like that. You really don't. I can say on paper it looks like A&M saying the right things, but we'll see.
Well, there's a lot more than football going on.
Really?
Believe it or not, there is. Men's basketball, they are up to number 11 and number 12 in the coaches in the AP poll, respectively. The SEC is just killing everyone in non-conference play right now. Even South Carolina, who's got the 16th net ranking in the league. They beat Clemson last night, who was ranked. The ACC is just getting owned by the SEC this year. So you watched the game against Purdue on Saturday. I did too. What was kind of your impression of the game?
Well, just a total team effort. I mean, A&M played like 10 guys, played like 10 minutes, and you've said several times, and I think this is huge moving forward. They don't need Wade Taylor to be an All-American every night to win a ball game. They don't really need anyone to be an All-American long as everybody else contributes, which they have guys go from scoring 12 points one game to no points the next game, which is great because they're still winning. And we all know A&M's about defense and offensive rebounding and what have you. And when you think that shows up every day, defense and rebounding, so to speak. And I chuckled when A&M moved to number 12 in AP this week. We're doing it in a football sport. You're trying hard to get to that top 12, trying to get to the top 12 in the college football playoff. A&M right now is a Sweet 16 team that can get better. I'm not saying they will get better, but I love the fact that their resume is so good going into the SEC. But what I liked is that was a hostile environment. They won 2 good games in a row at, quote, a neutral site that wasn't a neutral site. And I've always not even Buzz, but even Kennedy, whatever, the non-conference schedule was never good for A&M, and it cost them every time, the NCAA tournament was announced because now the league's better, A&M's better. So that, to me, that was just the final check, so to speak, of the non-conference schedule.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive what the SEC has done in non-conference play. Of course, things will start evening out once they get to conference play because you only play SEC teams. They're going to go 500 against the SEC in theory.
Well, I know we're hopping all around, but last night I was thinking, in the poll, in men's basketball, SEC is the number 1, number 2 team. You go look on the women's net ranking. They have 1 and 2 there too, with South Carolina and Texas. I mean, even though they're not in the polls that high, they're in the top 5, but you look at both leagues. I mean, in basketball, everybody says about football, but basketball, both of them could have national champs. Pretty wild.
Not to mention baseball and softball have been SEC-dominated leagues and only going to get better, especially in softball, with the addition of OU and Texas here this spring.
Yeah, when you look at that and you go like, wow, on both leagues. And there was a time that I said when A&M moved to the SEC, man, I said basketball will be hurt because you lose Baylor, you lose Texas, you lose Texas Tech, you lose that Texas
lose Kansas
rivalry, Kansas, the marquee. And I go, now you get Kentucky, but nothing else. But now you got Arkansas. I mean, now you have rivalries. Now you have Texas, even Oklahoma. And forget that, A&M is becoming a basketball power. So it's not so much about going out and watching the other team come to town. Now you can come out and watch the top 10, 11 or 12 team in the country. And if they're able to win a couple more, they might get to the top 10 before you know it.
Yeah, A&M's got 2 guarantee games this week against Houston Christian and then Abilene Christian, or I should say over the next 10 days or so.
They're on the Christian tour.
They are
on
on
Christmas. What Buzz was thinking, wasn't he?
Man, he's on to something. I'll let him know you said that.
Yeah.
Hey, milestone watch, though. Wade Taylor, 15 points away from moving into second place outright in A&M's all-time scoring list. He's on track to break Bernard King's school record in about mid to late February, so be keeping tabs on that as well. Pharrell Payne had a really great game against Purdue.
Yeah,
he was fantastic, especially against Purdue's big man, who was just having a great season up to that point. Really made him a non-factor until toward the end of the game, where he got a couple of quick baskets that really were non-consequential in the grand scheme of things. But, if Payne can play like that or play similar to that, A&M's gonna continue to have a really good rotation at that big man spot. They need Anderson Garcia to get back into a groove. He's just, I don't know what's up with Andy, but he's gotten into foul trouble a lot lately. The rebound numbers haven't been as high. He's been scoring pretty decently this year, but he's had a rough back-to-back stretch here this last 2 games against Texas Tech and then Purdue. And then beyond that, Wade Taylor continues to do good stuff. Zurich Phelps is having a good start to the season. And yeah, A&M's depth and well-roundedness is showing. And I think that, coupled with their veteran experience, is why they're winning so many of these close games.
And they hit the free throws down the stretch. I don't care what you say, how good you are, whatever level you're at, you have to hit free throws to win games. And the fact that they hit they hit all their free throws late to keep Purdue at bay, and that's been a problem in the past too. A&M at different times as a team just wouldn't shoot free throws down the stretch. It wasn't one person or what have you. So once again, A&M is checking all the boxes. But when you watch that team play, and I do like watching basketball because you're so close to it and what have you, to the court, not so far up. I just like the fact that it seems like A&M's play with a lot of confidence. Even when one play don't go well or a stretch doesn't go well. A couple years ago when they lost that 5 or 7, they lack confidence at different times. And I've saw that, but this time I think this team has a lot of confidence, and confidence to me is when things can go wrong and you still feel like you turn it around, and you do.
Take care of business the next 2 games. You start conference play 11-2, fringe, or maybe in the top 10, of course, and then it gets real quick. You got Texas in a rivalry game, and I know Texas isn't having a great start to the season, but it's a rivalry game. And Texas is not a bad team. Then you got Oklahoma on the road, who has been one of the biggest surprises, I think, so far this season. OU's having a great start to the year. Come back home against Alabama, who's the preseason SEC favorite, of course. That's going to be a tough game. And then I think they play LSU right after that. So, I mean, we're going to find A&M's not going to have this easy start to the SEC slate. Like, they've been through a meat grinder through this last 2-3 weeks, and it's going to stay that way here pretty soon once the holidays end.
But I like their schedule, non-conference schedule. I think it's prepared them for that. So I think they've become a title contender. And so while you can say those you got to beat your rival, you got to go to Oklahoma. If you are who you think you are, you'll handle that.
Something that I'm curious to watch, Auburn last night. John A. Broome. I mean, he's had a great. I mean, he's probably been the best player in the country so far this season. He hurt his shoulder pretty bad. It sounded like he might have dislocated it. He was in a sling during the second half of the game, and unknown what his time frame, if he's going to be out, how long is it going to be, but that's definitely a development to watch because he has been phenomenal this season so far.
Yeah, that's something you don't think about, but in the last few years, the way that these athletes can train, and it's such a physical sport, you're seeing more injuries affect teams and league races and what have you, and it's just the physicality of the game. And you go so hard for that 23 to 35 minutes that you're in, and a lot of times you have those injuries. And once again, A&M has the depth at a lot of positions, which can help you when those things happen.
Well, and for the most part this season, A&M's been healthy. The two games they lost, though, was the games they were not at full strength. Zurich Phelps didn't play in the season opener against UCF. We've seen what kind of impact he's had at the guard position, both scoring and on defense. And then against Oregon, Solomon Washington was having a pretty good game. He gets hurt there early and then has to leave. A&M couldn't really figure things out in the big man rotation there during that game. So, and Oregon's actually maintained a pretty good start. They're in the top 10.
They're top 10. Yeah,
it's not like they just
not a bad loss.
It's not a bad loss.
No.
So, we'll see how it all shakes out. Hey, we'll close with this. A&M volleyball took Wisconsin to the brink. Did you get to watch the match at all?
Yes, I did, because the women folk became big volleyball fans. So Morrison effect takes over, and you can watch it on ESPN Plus. And once again, if you have good players and a good team, people will find you. And they came so darn close to beating Wisconsin, even though I will say what's kind of interesting is all 4 number 1 seeds made it to the Final Four. And you talk about some sports don't get it right. Well, volleyball, evidently, their hierarchy, they got it right.
Yeah. A&M, great season, grew a lot. I mean, take the Wisconsin games, for example, right? It gets swept in Madison in non-conference play, and I know it was closer than what the box score indicates, but to then, 2 months later, get another crack at the same team in a big game and take them to the brink, I think it just shows the growth that A&M had. Got a huge win over Texas during this season. They're going to return most of their team next year, bringing in a even better recruiting class. Jamie's shown to use the portal to fill key spots already. I'm sure they'll get a girl or two out of the portal this offseason. So A&M volleyball is set up to probably be among the national contenders next year when you think about it.
Oh, yeah, once again is because we got a story coming out tomorrow. I think once again, the SEC, I think Kentucky's won the league 7 or 8 straight years in a row. A couple of those years they shared it with Florida, but for A&M to move up, to be in there, they beat Texas.
Texas is losing a lot. This
national champion. Yeah. So you compete with Kentucky. They beat Florida. Florida. You look at where they're at. They're on the climb because of Morrison.
Well, hey, that's going to do it for us. Be sure to check theeagle.com for all of our coverage on A&M sports. We'll be back next week, hopefully, from somebody from Vegas at least, previewing the big game on the. Is the stadium even on the Strip? Where is the stadium?
No, it's a one end, so to speak, when you come in to Vegas.
I've never been to Vegas. You probably have.
I've never been to the stadium. I've been to Vegas many times, but first time I'll go to the stadium. I will be at the stadium.
All right. Well, hey, we'll be back next week previewing the game. See you then.